This podcast is part of the Pull Up a Chair podcast network. Let's build community through connection, conversation, and collaboration. This podcast is sponsored by Lever Consulting, editing with a purpose. Check them out at leverconsulting.com for a free consultation.
Hey friends, you're listening to the Cat and Vee show. Pour yourself a juicy cup of tea, grab a seat, and get ready for us to dish.
Hey Vee.
Hey Cat.
Welcome to the Cat and Vee show, where we spill the tea and talk about other things that we think you'll find interesting. So I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome, which I've brought up in my social media now and again, and I feel like everyone at some point feels imposter syndrome. And so what is imposter syndrome? It's when you feel like you're not good enough to be doing something that you're perfectly qualified for. I think that's a good way to explain it, right, Vee?
Yeah, I think that's the best way of saying it.
Yeah. So for me personally, imposter syndrome is it's such an enemy to success. Because there are so many things that I personally I should be able to call myself an expert in. Mainly for me, it's like I have 2 degrees in communications and I did my thesis in social media. So I should be an expert in communications and social media, right? So, especially as I transition into the job search, it's kind of like, I deserve a job in this. I know exactly what I'm doing. I should, at least that's where I should be at. But sometimes I can be like, oh, but do I have enough experience? I think that they're going to look at me? Or am I good? Am I as good as other people? That's another thing that's attached to imposter syndrome is comparing yourself to other people, which is also extremely toxic. So yeah. For me, I'm working on stepping away from that imposter syndrome, which is a lot harder than it sounds, because sometimes you have to literally work backwards and rewire your brain to think differently. Because sometimes your insecurity can be so rooted inside of you that it's hard. It's like working past a trauma. Or most of the times it is working past a trauma, because a lot of people who have deep insecurity were probably baked into them from childhood trauma, from their family members or whatever. And I'm just speaking from experience because that's exactly where that came from for me. But yeah, so for me right now, I'm stepping into being a leader and stepping into owning the fact that I'm an expert in these things, where I literally did, I don't know, it should have been 8 years of schooling. It took a little longer because of my mental illness. But 8 years of schooling for not the same topic, but the same one, communications, and then further professional communications. I know what I'm doing. Anyway, and then
even if you aren't communicating it as thoroughly as you would like.
That's true. But yeah, and also yoga. For some reason, I've been doing yoga since 2013. It took me longer to step into the role of being a yoga teacher than a lot of other people that I trained with, because I had such anxiety and low self-esteem about thinking whether or not I could teach or not. So, Vee, do you have any experience with imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, it's a constant staple of my life. So I'm also very, very educated, but I'm always like, why would anybody hire me to do a website or a logo or leave their children with me when I've been watching kids for the last 15 years solo. Like, I potty trained several kids at this point. I should be like, I got this. And I also, like, am one of the quickest people on Photoshop that I've ever met. Like, I had a professor in college who's all like, you pick it up really fast. You're really good with this software. Meanwhile, I'm over there like, I can't do anything right.
Yeah, that's exactly imposter syndrome.
Like, yeah. I'm doing it well. Why do I think that I can't do it at all?
I mean, you literally got a degree for it. For me, it's like I'm very good at it and I pick it up very quickly, but I don't know any of the terms, like, or any of the science and like the theory that goes behind it. I just kind of have a natural knack for, like, an eye for design, I guess you would call it. But I don't know. I feel like you have so much knowledge and you've taught me like a good chunk of what I know. So you could easily teach if you wanted, which you are a teacher as well. You teach.
I juggle a lot, and because I'm not like the head person on any of the things that I do, it makes me feel better because I can always like look to somebody else because I feel like I'm just not capable.
Aren't you a manager now?
Yeah, I am, but there's people above me.
See, that's the imposter syndrome too. Like, you're literally a manager and you're like, I'm not a boss at anything. Are you kidding me? You're a manager. Stop. Like,
but I can look to somebody else and be like, hey, well, now that I'm blonde, I can be like, hey, can you come and help the dumb blonde over here?
Now that I'm blonde. Oh my God.
Yes. No, now that I'm blonde, that's my excuse for everything. Is I'm just a dumb blonde. I need help.
Oh my God. That's... Of
yes.
course, your self-deprecating humor is just
self-deprecating. I like to call myself a realist.
Oh my God! Stop it! Stop! No, literally, V. And on the topic of imposter syndrome, a good way to battle it is also to surround yourself with people who actually support you. So here's what I'm going to say, because V is literally one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my entire life. She's going to hate me.
I'm so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable.
She's going to hate me. But legitimately, she's had like, and I hope that you've listened to the second episode of season 2 of How's That Working For You, because it's all about her story. But like, legitimately, this girl grew up in the ghetto. Okay, like in the ghetto, and somehow finished 4-year university in like 3 years with 3 undergraduate degrees. Okay, 3, not even like a minor. No, 3 whole ass degrees. So do not like. I get so mad at her when she like she thinks that she's not good enough, and she just like, V, stop it.
All right, well, what are some ways, aside from getting a buddy, to help combat imposter syndrome?
I mean, honestly, I've actually been kind of writing and journaling about this, because the best way to learn is through experience, right? And then reflecting on your own experience. So for me, it's literally writing it down and then stepping away from it. Like writing down what you're frustrated with, what your insecurity is, right? And then stepping away from it for a second, and then rereading it and just really ask yourself, why do you feel that way? Like, is it truly what you are or just your feelings? Because feelings are so different. Like, they're not fact. Okay? So that's one way I deal with imposter syndrome. Second way I deal with imposter syndrome is literally arguing with yourself. Like, anytime that you feel like, oh, I'm not good enough, I don't know what I'm doing, it's just like, well, you do know what you're doing, so stop. Just legitimately just go do it. And it's harder. It takes practice. It takes practice to fully believe yourself when you're arguing with yourself. I'm sorry, I'm like being a little redundant, but it's just, that is another way to combat imposter syndrome. And sometimes, and I think this could be a little redundant, but also helpful, is when you see somebody that's already doing what you aspire to do, so like a role model, humanize them, because they're just people too. Like, legitimately, for me, I have some people that I follow on Instagram, and I just kind of follow them. It's like, well, one day we could be friends. You know, one day we could work with, collaborate with each other. One day we could do something, like we could work together, literally. So it's just, stop fangirling sometimes is what.
Okay.
Yeah, like, just like, maybe you can fangirl, but then at the same time, fangirl about yourself because you're awesome. Or fanboy. Or fan person.
Stop fanning.
Stop fanning, exactly. Yeah. So that's my take on imposter syndrome. V, stop shitting on yourself. I love you. Love yourself. Okay. Anyway, you can find us on
Slow head shake.
You need it. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
All right, you guys can find us on Instagram
and Twitter at the Cat and Vee Show, and check out our other podcast, How's That Working For You, where we talk a little more serious and in-depth about mental health issues. And yes. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Sarah and Scooter Podcast is a conversation between,
you guessed it,
Sarah
and Scooter. We are not experts on any of these topics.
Just hoping to spark something like an idea, conversation, or even a revelation.
Subjects will vary depending on our friends, family, and community.
Sometimes it will be what we want to talk about.
New episodes drop every week on all of your favorite podcast formats.
So pull up a chair and
let's talk about stuff.